Hello, awesome students. Let's continue our discussion of vertebrates with the reptiles. Before we dive in, though, let's recall some questions that we're trying to answer as we explore our vertebrates. One of them is being, how do I make more energy? The second question being, how do I protect myself from the sun? And the last question, how do I protect my babies once they have been reproduced? Now, as we get into the reptiles, we are still in Kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, and then now class Reptilia. Now, it's important to note that the reptiles are the first true land animals. Remember, frogs, as we discussed, are not true land animals because they must reproduce in water. Reptiles, on the other hand, are the first to be able to protect their embryos from the sun, and they actually have a skin that protects them from the sun as well. So they're able to protect their embryos from the sun, and their skin allows themselves to be protected from the sun as well. Now the skin is cool and dry, and these organisms are ectothermic, as we have discussed with our amphibians and our fish. And remember, ectothermic basically means outside heat. And basically what happens is the organism takes the temperature of its environment. If it is warm outside, the organism will be warm. If it's cold outside, the organism's temperature will be cold. Reptiles also have scales, which is one of their characteristic features. Let me repeat that. Reptiles have scales, which is a characteristic feature. Notice how I said characteristic feature, which means you need to know that is what differentiates the reptiles from earlier animals. And we find that their scales are actually made of keratin, just like the nails that are in our bodies. They also have keratin in their scales. Now we find that there are 4 orders of reptiles, that being the Squamata, which includes the snakes and lizards, the Testudines, which includes the turtles and tortoises, the Crocodilia, the alligators and crocodiles, and then the Spinodontia, which are the tartars. Now, tartars are basically found in New Zealand and Australia, and you don't really find a whole lot of them around. Some major advancements of the reptiles include a true land skin, as we mentioned a moment ago, the heart that actually develops a septum within the ventricle, which gives it what we consider to be a 4-chambered heart. Remember when we talked about the amphibian heart that only had 3 chambers, 2 upper atria and 1 lower ventricle? Well, right here in the reptilian heart, we actually see what appears to be 4 chambers. Now you see on the slide it says a 4-chamber heart with a septum defect, because there's still a gap between the upper atria and lower ventricles. And what this does is, even though it doesn't give a full or fully enclosed 4-chamber heart, it gives the idea of a 4-chamber heart. And what this does is, it's less likely to have blood mixing, and it also affords the animal the opportunity to have more blood getting to the body tissues, which ultimately leads to more energy production. And the last major advancement of the reptiles is the presence of an amniotic egg. Finally, a way to protect the young. Now, as you see here, the amnion, which is this structure here, this white membrane around the developing embryo, the amnion, is actually a sac that protects the baby from the outside. What it does is it keeps the moisture in, and it cushions and protects the developing baby. Now, this is the first time that we actually see internal fertilization, which happens in reptiles, because what happens is the baby must develop before the shell is formed. So again, reptiles is the first time we see internal fertilization, because the baby actually develops before the shell is formed. Because as you see on this shell, there are no openings, no entrances, no exits, no gates, no doors, no hinges, nothing. So therefore, the only way the embryo could get inside the egg is it must develop first and then the egg forms around. Again, we call this internal fertilization. Now, the basic parts of the amniotic egg, as we see here, are the amnion, which is a fluid-filled membrane to protect the embryo, albumin, which we tend to know as egg whites, which is mostly dissolved protein, keeps the embryo moist and cushions it, the allantois, which collects waste and helps with gas exchange, the chorion, which is a thin membrane just under the cell, which also allows for gas exchange, the yolk sac, which contains nutrients provided by the mother that are passed to the young, and then the shell, which is made of calcium carbonate, is water impermeable and is also gas impermeable. So these features here you will need to know about the amniotic egg. All right. As we know, reptiles are egg-laying animals. Animals that lay fertilized eggs are known as oviparous, which means birth from an egg. So again, animals that lay fertilized eggs are known as oviparous, and it means that the birth comes from an egg. And this requires internal fertilization, as we mentioned a moment ago. Now, we see that the shell that protects the actual internal embryo allows for gas exchange, but not any fluid exchange. So in a nutshell, air gets in, carbon dioxide can get out, but water stays in. And this helps to keep the baby from drying out. And we see that the parent must assist the developing embryo with temperature regulation, because remember, these organisms are ectotherms, which means they take the temperature of their environment. So if it's too hot outside, the embryo may become too hot. If it's too cold outside, the embryo may become too cold. So what you find is that the parents will either bury the eggs to keep them cool or actually sit on them to keep them warm when needed. Now let's go over these orders of the actual reptiles. So the first order we're going to talk about are snakes. Now we find that there are two types of snakes. The first type are vipers, which actually bite. And then we have constrictors, those that actually squeeze you to death, literally, in some cases. Some snakes actually will squeeze you to death. Now, they are defined as land animals without limbs. Again, snakes are defined as land animals that do not have limbs. Now, there are approximately 2,900 species of snakes, 375 which are poisonous, the venom that they inject into you. The largest snake is reported to be the reticulated python, which is about 30 feet. The smallest one is the Barbados thread snake, which is about 4 inches. As you see here, here's the thread snake here, and here's the reticulated python right here. It's a pretty big fellow there. Now, snakes actually do have teeth. Their teeth are rear facing so that the prey cannot escape their mouth, because as you know, if you actually seen a snake eat, they do not kill their prey before they eat. They actually eat the prey while it is still alive. Therefore, the teeth face in the rear so that the prey cannot escape the mouth. Now, we have front-facing teeth for biting and chewing, but snakes have rear-facing teeth. And as I mentioned, there are two types of snakes that are constrictors, and they are the venomous type. And we know that they are carnivorous because snakes do eat other animals. Now, with snakes, the flicking of their tongue helps them to smell air, if you will. So it is a way that they sense what's going on around them. The insects, remember, had little antennae that help with their sensing. Well, snakes use their tongue as a sensory organ to help them, quote unquote, smell the air. We talked about them being ectothermic, and because of their ectothermic nature, they will hibernate. And I'm pretty sure that you may have seen, may have come across, or even watched on television and know that snakes actually shed their skin, because you actually may have seen snake skin or remnants of it lying around if you've taken some nature trail walks, or depending on where you live, if there are a lot of snakes in the area, you may have seen some snake skin around. That's because snakes actually shed their skin, and they do this about 3 to 6 times a year. And it's been recorded that snakes can live up to about 50 years. Lizards are long-bodied with 2 pairs of legs and a tapered tail. And what this tapered tail means, it actually comes to a point. The tongue in a lizard varies. The skin has scales, but they can be modified for specific use. And there are 3,800 species currently known, with the gecko being the most common. Turtles and tortoises. Approximately 300 species of them. Now, how can we tell the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? And the way you can tell is pretty much their habitat. If the animal is water dwelling and has webbed feet, it is a turtle. Also, turtles are mostly carnivorous and they eat fish. Tortoises, on the other hand, are plant eating and they are land dwelling. And then you have the terrapin, which lives in brackish water, and it is a little turtle. So as you can see here, this is a terrapin, and yes, it is actually on a human fingertip. So it kind of gives you perspective as to how small this organism is. Now, just a little fun fact. We call these animals, or these cartoon creatures here, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Well, if you actually watch the cartoon in the movies, they do not live in water, they live on land. So more appropriately, they should be called Teenage Mutant Ninja Tortoises, but that really doesn't sound cool, so we go with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Alright, let's dive under the shell. The shell of a turtle or a tortoise is made of individual bony plates that are covered in keratin. And we see there are 4 parts of it, 4 bones. One is the carapace, the scute, the plastron, and the bridge. So these are the 4 bones that make up the turtle or tortoise shell. Now, it is part of the skeletal system and is permanently attached to the ribs and backbone. So just like you may have seen in animations where a turtle or a tortoise is able to jump out of its shell, that does not really happen in real life because it is actually attached to the living organism inside of it. All right, the crocodilians. The crocodilians make up the alligators, the crocodiles, and the caimans. Now, I'm pretty sure you know what an alligator and a crocodile is, but a caiman is a black version of a crocodile or an alligator, and they are often found in the Amazon and South America. Now, there are 24 powerful teeth per jaw, which is meant to crush. 99% of all crocodilians are actually eaten in their first year. And the crocodiles actually do cry while eating. I'm pretty sure you've heard of people say, oh, those are crocodile tears, because these tears are really not tears of sorrow or feeling. These tears actually happen because the force of their jaw pushing down when they actually eat pushes down on their lacrimal gland when they chew and actually create tears. So again, when the crocodiles actually eat, the force of their jaw pushes down on the lacrimal gland while they chew, and it's so great that it actually produces tears. Now, again, these organisms are ectothermic, and their mouths open to regulate the temperature and kind of give them what's called like a sweating. Now, the way to tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile is that the alligator has a rounded snout while the crocodile's is more pointed. And then crocodile eyes are actually red when light is shined in the dark. So as you see here in the picture, if you actually shine light on it when it's dark, their eyes will appear red. Now, with this figure here, imagine you were outside and you found your flashlight outside and you go to shine it and you see all of these little red marks here. What would you do? Well, I can tell you now, after I get out of shock, I probably would run away